sort of continuing from, I came 2 weeks ago, I'm sort of continuing from that. But everything's, fairly simple. There's something for everyone, I hope. But I want to do basically kind of an extended meditation for about an hour and a half, with many different steps along the way and some explanation. But I'll try to keep the explanation short and the meditation more. But usually, usually a Buddhist session, and we start with some kind of prayers. So I'll make the prayers very short also. The shortest prayer usually is to recite Shakyamuni Buddha's name mantra 3 times. Tayata Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Aswaka. So for those of you who don't know it, it's in the prayer book. It's on page 183 in the prayer book, page 183. So why don't we just sit quietly for a minute first, and then try to spend some time generating positive motivation. So get comfortable in a sort of meditation posture. So you're sitting cross-legged. Most of you are sitting cross-legged already. If you're sitting in a chair, sit up straight. Sit with your spine erect and balanced and relaxed, not tight. And your hands in your lap, either the right hand on top of the left. This is the most common position. Shoulders broad, chest open. And then let your gaze fall at about a 45-degree angle down. If your mind's very racing, you can close your eyes. Otherwise, just let your kind of eyes remain sort of half open. And then make the determination in your own mind to turn your attention towards your breath, just watching your breath or another object of focus for a minute or two, in order to try to reduce the distracting thoughts and focus your attention. And then just try to observe your breath for 2 minutes. And whenever you see your mind wandering and thinking about something else, just recognize that as a distraction. Try to let it go and bring your attention back to your breath. relax your attention on your breath. And then, so we try to generate a positive motivation before we recite the Buddha's name mantra. So think about the reasons that you've come here tonight, the reasons you're interested in meditation and Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist practice. So think about what are your short-term goals and long-term goals in relation to what we're doing tonight. So generate a motivation, at least that you can achieve those. And especially try to generate a motivation so that what you do here tonight as part of this this session, it becomes dharma, it becomes an antidote to afflictive emotions and to samsara. So to become dharma, the minimum is that at least you have a positive intention such that it serves. It doesn't serve to increase attachment or anger or arrogant pride, but rather serves as something that is the opposite to those. Creates more loving kindness, peacefulness, calm, detachment, humility, compassion, and so forth. And then if you can, you can think in a more broad way beyond just the happiness of this life or just the happiness for oneself. Think that whatever I do here may be a benefit not only to myself but also to countless other sentient beings, especially those with whom I interact with every day. And not only may it be a benefit in this life, but may it also be a benefit in future lives. And may it contribute towards all sentient beings achieving liberation from samsara and full enlightenment. Anyway, think whatever way is most suitable for yourself. So take a few moments, try to generate positive motivation. And then, so with that motivation, if you like, then in the space in front of you, you can visualize Shakyamuni Buddha, who is in one essence with all the Buddhas, and in one essence with the ones on spiritual guides. And then as we recite his name mantra, you can visualize light rays radiating out from every pore of the Buddha's holy body, purifying sentient beings of all forms of suffering, especially afflictive emotions and karma. Contaminating karma, and blessing all sentient beings to develop every positive quality, such as generosity, humility, honesty, wisdom, and so forth, up to full enlightenment. So we'll recite the name mantra a few times. So try to feel that Shakyamuni Buddha is very pleased with you. And and by way of blessing you to develop all the realizations of the path, and an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha comes to the crown of your head and absorbs down to the crown of your head and comes to abide at the center of your heart. Okay, so that's the preliminaries for the session tonight. So, just to kind of catch you up to where we are at this point. So we started going through this book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, by the great Pandit of ancient Nalanda Master Shantideva. So we went through the first chapter, which is all about the benefits of Bodhicitta. And then before we go to the second chapter, then we're going through the two different methods of generating bodhicitta. So there's two different methods. One called the sevenfold cause and effect method, where mainly we meditate on how all sentient beings have been our mother, our kind mother, father, friends, and so forth in past lives. So in short, all sentient beings have been very kind to us as our own dear mother and so forth in past lives. And then generate a wish to repay their kindness by achieving full enlightenment, in short. Right? So that's the one method we've already discussed. So then what I started discussing 2 weeks ago was the second method for generating bodhicitta, whereby we focus more on, on equanimity first, how all sentient beings, ourselves and other human beings and other animals and every form of being with consciousness, a sentient being, we're all equal in wishing for well-being, wishing for happiness, and wishing to avoid the opposite, wishing to avoid harm and suffering. So we're all equal, and then reflecting how every instance of happiness, of well-being we've ever experienced, all comes about in dependence upon others. In dependence upon our mother, our father, our siblings, our friends, our teachers, not to mention, countless strangers from whom we get clothes, shelter, medicine, knowledge, entertainment, and so forth. So how everything that brings us well-being all comes about in dependence upon others. So, and through the kindness of others, should we say. So reflecting on that, then in comparison to that, thinking about the faults of self-centered, self-centered, egocentric attitude. So that's what we discussed mostly last week. And the benefits of being altruistic, the benefits of having an attitude more focused on the well-being of others. So instead of being selfishly concerned only about my own likes and dislikes, my own desires, the opposite, being more concerned about the welfare of others. And then based on that, so that's kind of where we got up to last week, about that point. So based on that, then the method to generate bodhicitta is then to actually exchange self and others, and then practice giving and taking. It's called practicing giving and taking, and then generate bodhicitta. So, so what I want to do tonight is finish off this second method of generating bodhicitta, and then combine the two, right? So you can combine versus the first, the sevenfold cause and effect method, which has 7 steps, and then the second, this method of exchanging self and others, which has 5 steps. So there's a way of combining them into 11 steps, and then meditating on generating bodhicitta in that way. So that's what I'd like to do, is be able to, before we end the session, before we come to the question and answer period, I should say, before what time? 7:30. Before 7:30, to be able to meditate on each of those 11 steps. So, and get some sense of bodhicitta, right? Try to meditate on bodhicitta a little bit in this way. But before I do that, I want to just also mention 3 things that I spoke about 2 weeks ago, that, actually 4 things, that are the basis for meditating on bodhicitta. And maybe we can take a few minutes and just think about each of these things briefly. But the first is, I guess I should add also, the reason we're pausing to do this we're not going through the book like right now, is because basically everything in this book is based upon the idea, is based upon the view that bodhicitta, this aspiration to achieve the state of full enlightenment, to achieve the state of Buddhahood, and that is the best possible thing we can do with our life, because that is what's most beneficial to humanity, right, to all sentient beings, is a person who, just like, I mean, think of Shakyamuni Buddha, you know, what an he's just one person, right? But he's such a powerful, positive influence on millions and millions and millions of people for over 2,500 years, right? So what an incredible thing that is, right? To be a person like that. So the idea of bodhicitta is that, well, every one of us, every human being, every animal, every person with a consciousness, they have the potential to become exactly that, to become exactly that same kind of being, that same kind of person. And so every one of us has the same potential to be vastly beneficial to others, in just the way Shakyamuni Buddha was, right? And I wouldn't say Shakyamuni Buddha is not the only person who is vastly beneficial to sentient beings. I mean, we can think of many other examples, like all the founders of the different religious traditions, like Mahavira, or well, even like Sai Baba in the present day. I mean, like the Shirdi Sai Baba, even the past Sai Baba. I mean, the more recent Sai Baba, I don't know his name, Patipati.
Satya Sai Baba.
Satya Sai Baba, Satya Sai Baba. Patya Sai Baba is the next one. Yeah, right. Anyway, the two Sai Babas, very beneficial. Also like Jesus, Muhammad, and then in a more secular sense, like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Nelson Mandela, so many people. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, for special reasons, I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, for certain reasons, Shakyamuni Buddha is uncommonly, like, profoundly beneficial. But that has a lot to do with other things that we won't discuss expressly tonight. But okay, so but the whole reason so the reason we're taking this detour to meditate on bodhicitta is because everything in this book relates to bodhicitta, right? So if we don't have some sense of what bodhicitta is or how to meditate on bodhicitta, then although we can read through the book and understand a lot of different points, it doesn't really all coalesce as kind of one meaningful thing. So the idea is that, you know, for the weekend, anyway, for about 3 weekends, then we'll just spend time learning and becoming more familiar with the different methods for meditating on bodhicitta. So then from the next class, the next session we do on this book, we can easily relate everything he's saying back to bodhicitta. Right. Okay. So then, okay, Shanti changes my batteries. Okay. Yeah. So then, the 4 things I wanted to talk about first are, and just think about briefly first are, first is the whole, I mean, bodhicitta is the wish to become fully enlightened in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. So the first thing is to understand, well, that all sentient beings are suffering. Like, what does that mean? Dukkha, dukkha means actually dissatisfaction in a way. It can be, I mean, there's many different kinds of suffering. But, well, I mean, from very gross, like physical pain, or like mental, you know, depression, or, you know, anxiety, or anger. Those are very, I mean, those all have the very gross form, obvious forms of suffering. Even like the pain of hunger and thirst and fear. You can see even animals can easily identify those, right? Anybody can identify those. But then there's more subtle forms of suffering, like just being dissatisfied, like having enough money, having enough clothes, having food, having a family that, you know, is all very kind and, you know, kind to us, having good education, having, you know, like prosperity and opportunity and good fortune, but still feeling somehow empty inside, like there's something missing, feeling like there's, you know, a kind of subtle sense of there's something missing in my life, like I don't know what's the meaning of my life or something. So there's a more subtle level of kind of dissatisfaction. And then on an even subtler level, there's even the suffering of, even everything is going right, we feel like, we feel kind of fulfilled, but the potential for like disaster just being there, right? not knowing that we're not in a stable state of well-being because all the seeds for, you know, mental illness or physical illness or tragedy are kind of present. And so if the right conditions come about, then like obvious suffering will come to be. So not having a state of, being in a state of not having any certainty that the good fortune we have will last, right? So that's even a kind of more subtle level of suffering. So, yeah. So why don't we take just a couple minutes and just think about this kind of Buddhist assertion. So there's different ways to meditate. Also, I wanted to mention this. I want to meditate on, I mean, because I want to spend most of the session on meditation. But I know we're all at different, I mean, all of us, we're all kind of at different levels, you know. Like for someone like me, I've sort of accepted this whole Buddhist story and been studying it for a long time. So it's kind of like, I don't know, buttering my bread to, you know, to meditate on this stuff. It's just totally, I'm very familiar with it. But for, I know many of you are not like that, right? You might be totally new to these ideas. So, so if you're new to this kind of, you know, this kind of ideas in Buddhist meditation, especially there's two ways to sort of meditate, basically. One is the path of like blind faith. Just think, oh, it's probably like that, so I'll just believe that and just kind of think like that. But I mean, it's not really going to take you very far. I mean, it can be one way to just experiment. Well, if I think like this, what happens? You know, how does that feel? How does that change the way I see things, the way I think things, the way I experience things? So one way is just to kind of follow along as an experiment and see what happens. Another way is to be critical. So when I suggest that, oh, think about the suffering of all sentient beings, to ask yourself, translate that into a question. Is it true that all sentient beings suffer in these ways, or not? Right? That's it's going to be much more productive if you think like that, actually. To ask, challenge everything, be skeptical. So think, okay, you know, the meditation teacher saying, oh, you know, that all sentient beings suffer in these, you know, very gross, more subtle and very subtle ways. Is that true or not? What are the reasons that's true or not? So don't just blindly believe, but rather check and see if it's true or not. So then, then you clarify for yourself what makes sense. So then whatever conviction you come to that way, it's much more stable than just blindly believing something at the beginning. Right? So that's why it's more productive. But having said that, so I'm just saying that to sort of help you to know how to meditate, because I can't explain that again with every single point we're going to go through the points. But I guess I just want to put that out there so you feel the freedom to critically think and analyze for yourself. Don't just think, oh, if you don't blindly follow along, you're doing something wrong. Like that's not the case at all. Rather, it's better to analyze. Okay, so having said that, let's just spend a couple minutes thinking about dukkha, dissatisfactoriness of samsara, suffering that we experience. So start with yourself for like a minute, and then think of just the problems and sufferings that others experience in your family, in your country, in the world, and in the animal kingdom. Whatever kind of sentient beings you believe in, just bring to mind, starting with yourself and then expanding outward, bring to mind all the problems that afflict sentient beings. Because that is the purpose for generating bodhicitta. And then the next, so these four kind of preliminary things I wanted to mention. So the first is this, that all sentient beings are afflicted by different forms of suffering. The second is that, well, this is, yeah, so the assertion that every form of suffering, well, basically comes back to the root of every instance of suffering is say a grasping at self, grasping at an inherently existent self. So one way of thinking about this is that what I was explaining last week in terms of the faults of self-cherishing is that basically every negative karma that we create, like killing, stealing, lying, harming others intentionally, or harming ourselves intentionally, all arises from afflictive states of mind, disturbing emotions that arise in our mind, like anger, fear, jealousy, hatred, so forth. And that every afflictive state of mind arises from an exaggerated sense of the reality of oneself, of the concreteness of the I, of the self. So, and then an exaggerated concern with just my own likes and dislikes, my own happiness, my own desire for happiness, and wish to be free from suffering. So exaggerated concern with that at the exclusion of concern for others, right? So a self-centered attitude. And it's because that self-centered attitude is based upon a grasping at the self in a way that doesn't exist, right? In a way that's totally unreal. That the sense that there's an I that exists independently of my body or my mind or my perception of I, and independently of anything else in the world. It's something real and concrete from its own side. So it's because all suffering arises from this kind of grasping at this kind of concrete, real I, that, and that is false, that it's possible to be completely free from suffering, right? Because if you eliminate the cause, then you eliminate all of the results. Just like if there's one kind of fruit that all grows from one tree, if you just cut down that tree at the root, all the fruit also ceases to exist. So here's suffering, all of the different instances of problems and suffering that we have in our lives. They're all like the fruit on the tree. And the root of that is this kind of grasping at this concretely or independent existing self, sense of I. And then the trunk of the tree is like our obsession with just my own concern at the exclusion of being concerned with those around us, self-centered concern, self-centered attitude. So let's just think about for a few minutes whether this seems true. Maybe, I know there's many different aspects of it, it's quite complex, but just try to simplify it as much as you can in your own mind. And think, in short, the question is it true that all of the afflictive emotions that we experience, so the best place to check if it's true is in our own experience, right, with oneself, that they all arise from a self-centered concern, or not, right? Then the second question would be, and is that self-centered concern, does that have a basis in reality? Is that actually the way I exist? That is a valid way of kind of approaching things, or not? But we can focus on the first question for a few minutes. Is, every instance of anger, desire, jealousy, afflictive desire, afflictive doubt, does that all arise from a kind of self-centered concern or not? Selfish concern or not? That's the question. Alright, so let's just try to think about that for a couple minutes. Try to look at your own experience, look at your own mind, see if that seems to be the case or not. stop it. So then the last two things are, I'll just mention and then we'll start meditating on these 11 steps. So last two things are just like I was talking about last week, all the suffering we experience, it all arises from a false way of grasping at ourselves, at the self, at the way we exist. So that's why it's possible to eliminate all suffering, because the very basis of it is something that's a mistaken way of apprehending. So when we realize how we actually exist, then that totally disappears. And then all the resultant problems also disappear gradually. So the way we actually exist is as an interdependently arising phenomenon. We exist independent upon our body and independent upon all the different aspects of our mind. So on the collection, on the basis of this collection of our body and mind, we label I, we label self, me. And that's how we exist, simply. It's not that we don't exist, we do exist, but in this way as something that's labeled upon a collection of parts, none of which are I. If you look at your body, that's not who you are. I mean, that's not you. If you look at any part of your mind, that's also not you, right? It's your mind, because then the owner and the thing owned can't be the same thing, right? So then what are you? But it's not like we exist somewhere outside, somewhere separate from like our body and mind. We exist sort of in the same space as our body, and it's not like when our mind is thinking or feeling something that we don't think and feel those things. Like we think and feel because our mind thinks and feels. So we exist as something that's merely labeled upon a collection of body and mind. So seeing that, then it kind of reduces this sense of the life or death sort of importance of just me alone at the exclusion of any others. Or it loosens up the sense of self. So because that's an accurate way of perceiving how we are, then the more we recognize that, the more we reflect on that, the more we know that, come to know that, then because it's something that's in tune with reality, right? That is reality. The more we recognize that, the more that sense of knowing increases, that kind of wisdom increases endlessly, right? And that wisdom of interdependence, of us being an interdependently arising phenomenon, is something that it goes against the self-centered attitude which underlies anger and attachment, jealousy and so forth. And it supports the opposite. It supports loving kindness, compassion, altruism, generosity, patience, and so forth. So in short, that's why enlightenment is possible. Because, that's why liberation from suffering is possible, because all suffering is based upon a wrong way of perceiving the self, and all liberation and enlightenment all arises from a correct way, or valid way of perceiving how we exist and how things exist. Okay, so this is important in the context of bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is the attitude wishing to achieve enlightenment, right? So if you wish to achieve enlightenment, first you have to have some understanding of, well, why is enlightenment possible? Is it really possible? If you don't even feel it's really possible, then the aspiration to achieve that won't be stable or won't be meaningful at all, really. Okay, so that's why. And then the last thing is just that our mind. So this again, we don't have time to meditate on now, but I'll just throw it out there. So our mind is like none of the ignorance, or none of the afflictive emotions or disturbing states of mind that we have are of one nature with our mind. Our mind is like a whiteboard with a lot of drawing on it, right? So sometimes it has very nice drawings on it, and sometimes it has very ugly drawings on it. But whatever drawings you write on the whiteboard, none of them are part of the whiteboard, right? They can all be just wiped away, and then they're totally gone, as if they were never there. So every experience we have in our mind is all like that, right? It's the nature of, like the bare nature of our mind, it carries on, right? From 1 hour ago to now to 1 hour in the future, or from 20 years ago to now to 20 years in the future, or from millions of lifetimes ago to this life to millions of lifetimes in the future. Just the bare nature of what is our mind. It's that which is clear and knowing. It's this kind of awareness. It's aware of things. whatever, thoughts or feelings or external objects, or physical sensations or sounds. It's that potential to be aware of things, right? So that, and it's not only that potential, it's that entity which is aware of things, which knows things, which experiences things. It's the experiencer, right? So just that bare mind, there's no thought or feeling or experience which is of one nature with it. So that's why every negative experience we've had can be totally cleared away, and by developing wisdom which understands reality as it is, every positive experience we can create a stable basis for all positive qualities to develop in the future and increase those qualities to an infinite degree, which is enlightenment. Right? So that's why enlightenment is possible. Okay, so let's start on this kind of 11-step meditation process to develop bodhicitta, this aspiration. So again, bodhicitta is this attitude. Basically, it has two, I guess you could say, two companion sort of factors, two helpers. So one is compassion, seeing all sentient beings and wishing sentient beings to be free from suffering. So compassion is wishing for someone, oneself, or another person, or another group of people to be free from suffering. So seeing that the problems, the hardships, the pain, the misery, unhappiness, misfortune that oneself or another experiences, knowing that, recognizing that, empathizing with it, and then going beyond empathy and having the wish that oneself or another person could be free from that. Right? So when you see the problems that you yourself have, and just recognize those problems, instead of like looking away or ignoring them or denying them, just objectively looking at the difficulties we have. We all have, we all face different kinds of problems, right? So looking objectively at the kind of problems we have, and instead of feeling guilty and blaming ourselves, or instead of feeling angry at someone else and blaming another person, just looking at the problems and just generating a wish, I wish I could be free from that. How wonderful it would be to be free from that. May I be free from those problems. So all those attitudes, compassion, different levels of compassion. So just to wish, may I be free from this problem. It's compassion for oneself, and then the same in regard to another. We have another person, a friend or a spouse or whatever, another person, your family or neighbor, and you see problems they experience, and again, without making any judgments about, oh, that's their fault, or that's this person's fault, or that's good, or that's bad, without making any judgments, just recognizing that they suffer because of that experience. It's something that brings, it's difficult to bear. It brings hardship. It brings dis-ease, right, to that person. So recognizing that, empathizing with it in a sense that, you can imagine what it feels like to experience that. And then not only resting there with empathy, but then generating the wish, may they be free from that. How wonderful it would be free from that. And then the next step, may I be able to do something to free them from that. So those are all different levels of compassion. So in short, compassion is wishing for oneself or others to be free from any instance of suffering, or just suffering in general. So that's the basis of bodhicitta. So one is compassion, and then the other is seeing, in reaction to seeing the suffering of oneself, especially others actually, in reaction to seeing the suffering of all sentient beings without excluding even one, then thinking, I myself must do something about that. And the best thing I can do about that is to achieve full enlightenment, to develop all of my positive qualities to the highest potential. Right? So that's what bodhicitta is, in short. So that's what we're aiming for. But let's gradually go through these kind of 11 steps, just very, very briefly, a few minutes each step. And then try to culminate in that attitude. Right? So the first step is equanimity. So equanimity is basically recognizing that all other sentient beings, every other human being, every other animal, every other being, sentient being with a mind, hell beings, hungry ghosts, devas, gods and demigods, all beings with a mind, like me, are the same as me in wishing to have happiness, right? Wishing to have well-being, wishing to have, a sense of satisfaction. peace and joy. Right? So everything that goes together, I mean, happiness is like a very big kind of arena. There's a lot of things that go in just this very simple word, happiness. There's all different kinds of happiness. So every sentient being is like me in just wishing to have some form of happiness, right? Wishing to have happiness. And every sentient being is the same as me in not wanting suffering, not wanting physical suffering or mental suffering, misfortune, and so forth. So yeah, basically that. I mean, I could elaborate more, but just to keep it simple, let's just think about that for 2 minutes, right? Just think about how, is it true or not? So again, you can make it a question, is it true or not? But if you've already answered the question yourself, then just meditate. So whatever stage you're at, just meditate on that. That we're all equal in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Right? So just try to meditate on that for 2 minutes. So that's the first step. The first step, equanimity. Then the second step is thinking how all sentient beings have been embodied. So, yeah, for most people in Buddhism, this is quite, even the Mahayana Buddhism especially, it's quite a strange concept. But the reasoning in short is like this. Like, each of us have taken rebirth now as a human being. We're very fortunate to take rebirth as a human being. We can take rebirth as any of the 6 kinds of beings in samsara: a hell being, a hungry ghost, an animal, a human being, and then a god of the form realm or the formless realm. and a demigod, which is kind of a less powerful sort of deva. Yeah. But in short, in many of our rebirths, we have a mother. Just like as a human being, we were born from a mother's womb in this life. So the amount, and we have past lives, right? And the amount of past lives we have is infinite, because you can't find a beginning to the stream of consciousness, right? We have a stream of consciousness, which is, entered this body, entered the sperm and egg cell of our parents at the time of conception, and then developed, that body developed into, the body of a 9-month-old, and then we were delivered from our mother's womb, and then our body continued to grow, and as our mind also continued to develop. But if you look back, like our mind doesn't come from the physical cells of our body, right? So the first moment, at the moment of conception, the first moment of consciousness, which existed at the moment of conception, it had to have come from somewhere. The cause of that couldn't have been something physical, so it had to come from a previous moment of consciousness. Therefore, we had to have had a previous life before this rebirth, right? Basically, that's the reasoning then. That we had a previous life, a life before that, rebirth before that. So, in short, in the past we've had infinite rebirths. In those rebirths, and many of those rebirths, we've had a mother, just like we have a mother in this life. So, and our mother in the previous life was not the same as this one, in most cases, could have been sometimes. But because we have infinite lives, infinite past lives, then we have infinite mothers. There have been infinite. So there have been infinite number of sentient beings who have been our mother. So, in short, you can't point to any sentient being who exists and say that person has never been my mother. And in fact, most of them have been our mothers. Right? So that's the logic. Right? Yeah, so let's just spend a few minutes thinking about that logic. Does it make sense for you? Does it not? What are the reasons that seem for? What are the reasons seem against? Yeah, and in short, well, I mean, for many of you, probably a lot of different questions come up. Like first question, well, are there even past and future lives? Do they exist or not? So feel free to also address those questions. Whatever questions seem most relevant to you, like in relation to this specific assertion, then think about those for a couple of minutes. But the idea is that at the least, we can't point to any sentient being who hasn't been, and it doesn't apply only to our mother, right? The same reasoning applies to, our father, friends, teachers, relatives, all, think about all the people who've been the most kind to you in this life, right? In short, the essence is, think about the people who've been the most kind to you in this life, right? So typically you think about a mother, but could be, aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends, spouse, so forth. So whoever people have been most kind to you in this life, and then think, well, I've also had a past life. In that life, many people were also kind to me. I've also had a life before that, and so the chain of previous lives is infinite. Right? The number of previous lives is infinite. In those lives, there are many people who have been kind to me. So, in short, the conclusion is all sentient beings have been incredibly kind to me. Even if in this life most of them are just strangers to me, they haven't been strangers in every life. Just like the people who've been the kindest to me in this life, my parents and siblings and so forth. When I die and they die, and we take rebirth in a future life, they'll all be strangers, right? But that doesn't change the fact that they were very kind to me in this life, right? So the same reasoning applies to past lives. In countless past lives, there have been countless people who have been incredibly kind to me. So where are they now? There are all these sentient beings who seem like strangers to me now. But in fact, if you look at the whole course of past life, they've all been, the whole course of past lives, they've all been incredibly kind to me. So I know there's a lot to think about here, but we don't have so much time to go into every detail. But just take a couple minutes and think about whatever aspects seem most kind of interesting to you or significant to you. Okay? So again, meditate for 2 minutes. So pause there. So that's the second. So the first step, equanimity. And then the second step was thinking about how all sentient beings have been our kind mothers, fathers, siblings, friends, and so forth in past lives. Then the third step is thinking about their kindness, right? Thinking how other sentient beings have been kind to us. So, so there's two different ways to think here. One is just think about the people in your life now who are the most kind to you, whoever they are. It could be your mother, your father, aunts, uncles, grandparents, siblings, spouse, friends, teachers, whoever it is. It doesn't have to be just one person also. Think about many different people. Let's start with one and then go to, don't just kind of think abstractly all of them at once. It's more powerful. I mean, it's more powerful, of course, if you have a whole hour just to spend on this, right? Just think about one person, or even one person for 1 hour one day. Then the next day think about another person and think how they've been kind to you in different ways. In order to generate a sense of gratitude for that. So that's one way to think, is just thinking about the kindness of specific people who've been kind to us directly, like we know them face to face, and they've done things that are really helpful to us. Just like our parents have, usually we think about our mother because our life now wouldn't be possible without our mother, right? Because she bore us in her womb for 9 months. And then, from the time we were delivered, she cared for us. We're completely helpless. Right? Cannot feed ourselves, can't go to the toilet ourselves, can't clean ourselves. Even difficult to put ourselves to sleep. Can't eat on our own. So our mother cares for us day and night, like continually, for the first months and then years of our life. So in that way, every mother is who cares for her children is incredibly kind to the children. And so as children, all of us children have been cared for by a mother, then incredibly kind in that way. But there's also, many ways. It's not that our father is not kind to us, or our grandparents are not kind to us. Of course, there are many other people who've been incredibly kind to us in different ways. But usually the mother is held up as sort of a special case because of the way she's physically cared for us so selflessly for months, for most of us. Okay, so one is to think about the people who are directly kind to us. Another way to think, a second way to think about the kindness of others. So, hold on. So before I jump to the second way, so if we think about just the kindness of our mother, our father in this life to us, and then tie that together with what we just did, thinking about how all sentient beings have been our mother, father, sibling in past lives, then that sense of gratitude towards our mother of this life, then it's a way of extending it to all sentient beings. So the second way to think here is to ask this question: is there anything which I enjoy? Think about just all the things you enjoy. Is there anything which I enjoy in this life? Just think about this life, which hasn't come about in dependence upon other sentient beings, right? Whether I know them or not. So, if you like reading books, think about books you like to read. If you like to travel, think about how you travel. If you like to, if you like to sleep, think about the bed that you sleep in, or your favorite blankets, or whatever. So whatever, if you like to eat, think about the food you eat. Whatever it is you enjoy, all the different things you enjoy, ask this question: is there anything I enjoy which hasn't come about in dependence upon others? Right? The answer is quite obviously no. So then you see that, then it leads you to think about, well, how everything I enjoy, from these kind of trivial things which I just mentioned, to the most profound things, maybe the most profoundly gratifying experiences you've had in your life, they've come about in dependence upon others. And think about so here we're thinking about like a chain of causation. Think about all the different individuals, most of whom I have no idea who they are, who've contributed to that being possible. Right? That profoundly gratifying experience, or even trivially pleasant experience, being possible. In short, if we can generate this sense of how everything we enjoy in this life all comes about in dependence upon countless other people, even not thinking about past lives, just thinking about this life, then we can start to generate a sense of gratitude for the kindness of others, right? So, in short, that's the goal for these two different ways of thinking, is generating a sense of gratitude gratitude for the kindness of others, right? So there's one way of thinking about our mother, father, and others in this life, and the second way beginning with all the things we enjoy most and thinking, where do those things, how have those things been possible? Right? Where do those things come from? How that's related to others and making things, making those experiences possible. So again, take, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes this time, because there's a little more to think about. And try to think about, whatever seems interesting to you, or whatever seems significant to you in these two ideas. Okay? So thinking about the kindness of our mother, and so forth, kindness of others, and in these two different ways. That they've been our mother, and so forth, and that they make possible all the things we enjoy. Okay, so pause now. So that's the third step, equanimity. Thinking about all sentient beings have been our mothers, our kind mothers. Thinking about the kindness of our mother's sentient beings. And then the third step is just very brief, generating the resolve to repay the kindness. Right? So generating the resolve to repay the kindness of others. Right? So we can just spend 30 seconds, think about that. So we've just been thinking about the kindness of other sentient beings. So now just try to generate, dissolve the sense of responsibility, that we have a responsibility to do something, give back to, because we've received so much from others. So we have a responsibility to give something back, to do something to benefit others, since they've benefited us in so many ways. So just try to think about that for about 30 seconds. And try to generate that resolve to repay the kindness of others. So then the next step, again, something I explained in detail 2 weeks ago, but it's the thinking about the faults of self-cherishing. So I don't have time to explain much about it now, but in short, it's thinking about how this self-centered, egoistic attitude causes so many problems in our life. So one simple way to think is how, every time we become angry at someone else, or we're thinking primarily about benefiting others, or thinking about just what we becoming upset because we're not getting what we want, or other people aren't treating us the way we want. Or think about instances of being having greed or craving, attachment, and how it's a totally self-centered attitude. It's totally thinking about exclusively what I want, what I feel like I need, what I desire in that moment, and how that blocks us from regarding or being sensitive to the needs and the needs of others around us. So in short, I mean, the idea is that every non-virtuous action we engage in, whether it be stealing or lying or killing, or more subtle non-virtues, innocent non-virtues, like slander or harsh speech or just idle gossip. How every action we engage in, which is harmful to ourselves or others, all come about through this self-centered, selfish concern for our welfare alone, at the exclusion of concern for others, right? An egoistic attitude. So, so let's see, we're up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th step, right? So the 11 steps. The 5th step is just to think about the faults of self-cherishing, right? And you can kind of contrast. We're just thinking about the kindness of others and generate a sense of gratitude for others, sense of wishing to repay the kindness of others. So in contrast to that, I want to think about the faults of just being concerned exclusively about my kind of, my dramas alone, right? At the exclusion of others. And think about all the faults of being totally self-centered. Right, so again, just take maybe 30 seconds. We're running out of time. I want to finish this within like 15 minutes, so you have to go a little quicker. So yeah, just take 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. Try to think in whatever way you can about the faults of the self-centered attitude, self-cherishing. then the next step, or the sixth step, is to think about the opposite, the benefits of cherishing others. So as opposed to this small, very narrow-minded, self-centered attitude, think about the opposite, very altruistic, other-centered attitude. Think how all the benefits of being more concerned with the welfare of others. So some of the benefits are, for example, when we're sincerely concerned with the welfare of others, it's very easy to have tolerance and patience. When we have a very self-centered attitude, we easily become offended and sort of disappointed and irritated. So having a very other-centered attitude, being more concerned with the welfare of others, feeling that the well-being of others as a whole is more important than just my own well-being alone. Then we easily have a sense of affection and concern for others, so we easily feel like a sense of closeness with people. And anywhere we go, we don't feel like strangers and me. There's this huge chasm between us. We easily feel like all of those people are just like me, and they want to be happy. I want to be happy. They want to be free from suffering. I want to be free from suffering. We're just the same. So we easily feel a sense of friendship and affinity with people wherever we go. Also, we refrain from harming others. We're more mindful not to betray the trust of or say things that are hurtful to the people around us. So other people trust us more. So we tend to have better friendships, more long-lasting friendships, and friendships that aren't destroyed by moments of anger so easily. So we tend to have less anger and less unrealistic expectation of people around us. Also, when we're caring about, when we're more concerned and caring about the people around us, they like that. Just like we like when other people are interested and concerned and care about us. We feel that those people are kind of nurturing and supportive. We can trust them, right? So and we like them. So we're like that towards other people, and then they naturally like us. So we have good friendships. Another is that we feel like our life is meaningful. It brings a sense of meaning to life because we feel like we're concerned about the welfare of others, and we do what we can to contribute to the welfare of others around us. Then naturally there's a sense of fulfillment that comes from that, and so there's a natural sense of self-satisfaction, happiness that comes from that. Of course, that shouldn't be the aim alone, but it's a fringe benefit that comes along. It helps to have a sense of courage in the face of adversity. So, if we only think about our likes and dislikes and our aims, and then we easily have a sense of being in competition with others and feeling isolated and cut off from others and feeling lonely, and so and sort of small in relation to this huge world. So then when we have problems, they seem like completely all-encompassing problems, because all we're thinking about is our little world alone. So then when we have big problems, that's all we see is these huge problems, right? Whereas if we have this big, broad mind thinking, I'm just one small person in the world of 7 billion people, and I should do whatever I can to contribute to the welfare of all people, and if not all 7 billion, at least all the 10 million in Bangalore, or 1,000 in my family, or whatever. But if we have this, the more broad our sense of concern is, then when problems come about for us, they don't seem so big because our perspective is really broad. So it's like, a big problem for me, but in compared to the welfare of the world, it's not very significant, not a big deal. So I can deal with it, right? And then we have a whole network of friends to help deal with it. So it helps to have a sense of courage in this way. Anyway, these are some of the benefits of, so try to think about these and whatever other benefits you can think of having an altruistic attitude, being more concerned with the welfare of others rather than just being concerned, selfish concern for oneself alone. So again, just think for, 60 seconds or so about this. The benefits of cherishing others. This is the benefits of cherishing others. Okay, so relax there. So the next one is called actually exchanging self and others. So we've gone through equanimity, thinking about how all sentient beings have been our mother, is the second. The third, thinking of the kindness of all sentient beings, in terms of being our mother and so forth, and in terms of making possible everything we enjoy. Then generating a sense of we should repay the kindness of others. Thinking about, then fifth, thinking about the faults of self-cherishing. Sixth, thinking about the benefits of cherishing others. So now the seventh, is actually exchanging self and others. So this one's a little different. So this one is, the main way to think like this. Basically the idea is like this. We have, when we look at our body or mind, we think, I, this is me. So we have a sort of an innate sense that the problems that we experience, we're responsible for those. Because, they're what I experience. Other people don't experience those problems. And the problems other people experience, they're not mine because I don't experience them, right? So then why should I care about them? So we want to overcome that, right? So one reasoning is think like this. Like, we have, we'll think about it. One is like this. Our body, where did our body come from, right? Our body came from our parents, obviously. It came from our parent, the sperm and egg cells from our mother and father. So those cells, they're not us, right? They belong to another person's body, our parents' bodies. But then through habituation, through being, well, those cells then multiply and then become, this body which we experience. Through over years being habituated to experiencing this body in a particular way, we think of it as I and mine, right? But it's just habituation with something that is not innately belonging to us, right? So one way to think is that this body, which I think of as I and mine, in compared to someone else, it's other, right? It's the other one. Like, I think of this body and mine as mine, and I think of yours as yours and others. But for all of you, when you look at my body and mine, you think of it as someone else's, as others, right? Not mine, right? So it's just through a matter of habituation. Also, another way to think is like, we have two hands, right? Each of us has two hands. So in relation to my right hand, my left hand is other. So why should I care about? Why should the right hand care about the left hand, kind of? Because they're two different things. But whatever suffering the left hand has, it's going to experience, it affects the whole organism that the right hand is part of, right? So the right hand helps out the left hand, or the hands help the feet, or the different parts of the body, they're all part of the same thing. So, of course, they don't have mind and they don't think of themselves, but it's just kind of an analogy. That we're all part of the same thing, right? We're all part of the same human society, or the same group of all sentient beings, right? So through habituation, we can learn to be concerned with the welfare of other sentient beings as much as we are with ourselves. Just as through habituation with this body, from the time of conception, we learn to be concerned about something that isn't inherently us, right? It's different from us. Also, going back to self and other, now when we think of a self, we think of just our own body and mind, and think of others as other, but in relation to those, we're other, and the others what we think of as other are all selves, right? For those other people, what we think of other is self, right? But through this way we've been thinking about before, thinking about the kindness of others, how others have been so kind to us, how they're the same as us in wishing for happiness, wishing to be free from suffering, and also recognizing that the way we think and the faults of self-cherishing, the benefits of cherishing others, right? Then we can try to generate this This recognition that, well, we can try to identify, instead of identifying just with the body and mind, which are part of my continuum, we can generate a sort of sense of self which identifies with all other sentient beings as being as important in my concern, in my eyes of concern, as is just, this kind of collection of body and mind, right? So in short, trying to exchange this self and others, right? So the starting point is the ordinary way of thinking that, this collection of body and mind, this person is very important and others are not important, right? So we want to totally change that. Think others are very important and just myself alone is not so important, right? That's the way of exchanging, right? So thinking others are so important and changing that by identifying with, instead of identifying so much with myself alone as in isolation from others, identifying with the whole organism that we're all part of, which is like, I think, our human society, or the family of all sentient beings. Instead of identifying ourselves alone, primarily putting our identification on identifying with the whole, which includes all the others, and recognizing it in relation to all the others, in this whole family that I'm part of, like I'm not very significant at all. It's kind of like, think about the cells in your body. The cells in the body, none of them think, oh, I'm just here just to grow and reproduce for myself alone. They all kind of work in perfect sync, together. So of course they don't each have their own consciousness and don't think, but it's like they automatically, or you could think like ants and an ant hive. I'm not sure. A beehive, bees in a beehive, ants an ant hill maybe. How they all just automatically work for the welfare of the whole. Without a strong sense of being something in existence that's separate from that. It's kind of like trying to generate that sort of concern with the whole, with the welfare of all other sentient beings. So let's take a minute and try to think about that. Try to practice that a little bit, exchanging self and others. Right? The sense of importance we placed on ourself in isolation, put on others. The sense of kind of lack of concern that we generally place on others, put on this isolated self. So try to exchange self and others for a minute. Okay, we can pause now. Actually, we're up to 7:30, after 7:30 now, so we've gotten through how many steps? Equalizing self and others. No. No, that's equanimity. Equanimity, all sentient beings are better. The kindness of all sentient beings, we should repay the kindness. fifth, faults of self-cherishing. Sixth, the benefits of cherishing others. And the seventh, so this is seven, exchanging self and others. So we can continue the rest tomorrow morning. And the next session tomorrow morning. Well, we'll see. Maybe we'll get some more time tonight, but I don't think we'll get through all the rest. So anyway, I want to pause now to see if you have any questions or comments. Anything. We've gone through a lot of stuff already, and it's quite late. I'm probably tired. See if you have any questions or comments.
Why is the second step, if we are doing exchanging self others, why are we talking about everyone having been a mother in the second step?
We're combining the two.
Oh.
You can combine the two methods in one. Abongkar and Geshe presents like that in the liberation of the palm of our hand. That's considered to be the most effective way to combine the two. We've talked about a lot of interesting things, I think.
But if you're practicing this meditation, is it better to do different methods or just stick to one?
That's a good question. I think it's best to do both. They're not contradictory, or it's not like, like if we're doing placement meditation, it's best not to jump from one object to another, because you never get very stable and clear on one object. But analytical meditation, it's best to be very dynamic and think about a lot of different things, right? Especially a lot of different reasons that bring you to the same conclusion, because it makes that conclusion very stable, right? So these two methods, they use very different reasonings to come to the same kind of conclusion that I should kind of become radically altruistic and strive to achieve the most positive qualities I can in order to benefit others. So it's better to combine the two and to switch back and forth, not just use one. But in one, if you're going to focus like on 1 month on generating bodhicitta, yeah, you might want to just focus on one. You should, but not just kind of mix them all the time. Yeah, I think Ravi had his hand up first, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, actually, referring to the merits of cherishing others.
Mm-hmm.
What are the aspects? What do you can think about it?
What are other things to think about?
Yes.
The benefits of cherishing others?
Yeah. What aspects we can think of cherishing others? Like, how do you think that?
Oh, how do you think about the benefits?
The sixth.
Yeah.
The sixth point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's lots and lots of benefits. Usually I try to focus on, I usually talk about just kind of the immediate, obvious things. But, one, it just makes you happy, right? The more you're concerned about others, then you naturally have, affection. You're wishing for the well-being of others, wishing for the happiness of others, which, brings you happiness yourself. You feel good. Another is you naturally have compassion. If you have caring about, the more you care about others, and when you see them suffering, you naturally wish that they can be free from that suffering. Which also, of course, there is some sense of feeling a degree of the suffering the others feel, but there's also something satisfying about being sensitive to, being aware, and being connected with. You feel a sense of connection with others in a way that's very gratifying, I think. Of course, again, that shouldn't be the object, because if that is the objective, it becomes kind of selfish, right? There's always a danger that this selfish concern can undermine even any virtuous thing that we do. But even among strangers, if you have a sense of being concerned about others, you feel connected with them. So there's a kind of peace that comes. Another is, as I mentioned, it reduces your being prone to harm others. So it increases your patience, your tolerance. I think increases your ability to bear abuse or bear offense from others, to bear harm in the face of others. And not react in a way that you might regret later on, not react with anger or with harm in kind. So basically caring about others, having altruistic concern, it reinforces every positive state of mind that you can have, and reduces all the negative states of mind, in short. And in that way, well, like I said, also it helps you have better friendships, more, less prone to depression, because one of the major causes of depression is loneliness. So it reduces your sense of loneliness, reduces the sense of, I think it can reduce a sense of low self-esteem, increases your sense of being, let's see, like one of the, it's kind of referring to some contemporary studies in psychology, but in people who are least prone to depression, one of the prevalent characteristics, I guess, they have is strongly identifying with the group, right? So whatever kind of group, whether it's a sports group or an arts group or a religious group or whatever, the more you strongly identify with the group, the more you're less prone to depression and other problems, physical problems that go along with it. So the more you're concerned about others, you're identifying with all groups, all other beings. Or it could be more than just a specific group, but so it's good for your mental health. But then, not to mention, it helps you to generate greater compassion, which helps you generate bodhicitta, so it helps you to become enlightened more quickly, and is pleasing to all of, if you have spiritual teachers, then it pleases them when they see that you're sincerely concerned with the welfare of others. It's pleasing to your spiritual teachers, so in that way you also create a lot of merit, and you create the causes to receive spiritual teaching. So it naturally leads you into being intrigued and being interested about, well, what are ways I can use my life to benefit others? If you're really concerned about others, then you naturally think, well, the next step is to think, well, what can I do with my life to benefit others? And then if you actually do you do things with your life, your career, or your charitable work, or in your family, you do things to benefit others, then that's like a reward in itself, right? Then you feel like you have meaning. There's some meaning in your life. There's a sense of that, you're a good person. You're doing something worthwhile. And then at the time of death, you're free from regret. So that's another benefit. You feel like good about yourself, about your life. And also, your life is beneficial to others. Just caring about others in itself is doing something, right? Even if you can't do something like huge and profound, like they teach 1,000 students or perform life-saving surgery on people or something like that. Just caring about others is something that people around you, they feel that you care, and that brings. So I've been talking about just the benefits for yourself. That's not to mention the benefits for others. If the others around you, they feel you care about them, then it brings them safety from fear. Because think about the opposite. If you're around someone who you feel like that person doesn't care about me at all, right? There's a sense of concern that, well, what are they going to do? If it becomes in their interest to do something that's harmful to me, then they're not going to think twice about doing that. Like in the office place, you probably experienced that. I haven't worked in a big office, but I can imagine, if you're working in an office place. I worked closely working on a boat, a fishing boat. But there's another person on the boat that you feel like this person sincerely is concerned about my welfare. Then you feel like if they see that there's some danger to me, then they'll try to do something about that. Whereas if there's another person who you feel like they just here to make a lot of profit and do as little work as possible for themselves, they just want to do as little work as possible and make the greatest amount of profit. And they're not going to think twice about, they don't care about what happens to me or not. Then you're going to, around that person, you're going to feel like, look, I have to watch out for myself, because that person doesn't care about me at all. So there's, the sense of, it's a kind of danger. If you don't care about other people, then other people don't really feel safe around you. If you care about other people feel safe around you, and they like to be around you. So it benefits people in that way. Not to mention, eventually you become enlightened and you can benefit people in an incredibly vaster way. But, those are some of the benefits. The more you think about it, the more benefits you see. Yes.
So we are when we are trusting others,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So when they have, so we feel compassion
Mm-hmm.
when they have any suffering or something.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to help them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So but sometimes they will not trust you.
Mm-hmm.
Like we may get cheated.
Yeah.
So in that case, actually, even so what is the thing, like, why you need to show compassion to those people? How to identify the right people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to use wisdom also. I mean, you have to use wisdom to not get cheated, so to protect yourself from being cheated on the one hand. On the other hand, I mean, you get cheated means like what? You lose some money. Right? Not a big deal.
As well as some laws.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. People can take advantage of us, right? But there's also a big danger of like making excuses just to be like really self-centered, because we think, well, if I'm not, other people are going to take advantage of us. So, yeah, I mean, just being compassionate and caring about others doesn't mean like throwing all wisdom kind of to the wind, out the window. Like if you're in a situation like, like I was mentioning, in a workplace where there's some people who are just totally self-interested and don't care about others, you at all, and then, they're always trying to offload their work onto you, it doesn't mean that you just have to, do all their work if you feel like it's really unfair, and also it's not really helpful for that person in the long run, then, you can stand up for yourself. But, another opposite way of dealing with the situation would just to be like, yeah, no, I don't mind doing their work because I know it's not fair, but whatever, it's not harmful to me, I can do it, so I'll just do it, and if it's beneficial for them, so be it, that's great. And if it's just like, if it's a burden I'm willing to bear, then I'll bear it, if there's some benefit. You can also kind of think like that, and it's not like, yeah, you can just, you deal with each situation sort of as it comes. But, yeah, those are the kind of, I guess for each of us, we have to be realistic about what we can do, what our capacity is, So for some people, they might have, the capacity to kind of, there's even a practice. Even I read somewhere, I think Vivekananda did this practice, but in Buddhist there's also this practice there of like, going to a place where there's a lot of mosquitoes and like burying your torso or whatever, and just letting mosquitoes feed on you as a way of practicing generosity, right? For most of us, like, it's really difficult just to let, I can let one mosquito bite me. I've become quite good at that, just let one mosquito bite me. But if it's like 5, then it starts to be a little too much, Then, so you can imagine like thousands, at the same time. So, it's kind of like that with people taking advantage of you. On the one hand, like, maybe you can, like, there's stories from the Jataka tales, Buddha's past lives, where he even, like, offers his body to a hunter, or offers his, as a prince, offers his body to a tigress, even offers his life, so that another being can eat, just have a meal, right? But for most of us, that's not really like a realistic way, or even maybe not sure that's really a wise way to, and in the way we think about like ourselves, our life, because most of us, we're just thinking about this life and how precious it is. If I just throw this life, not, in the one sense it would just be like throwing this life away for the meal of an animal or something, right? Like thinking of the Shakyamuni Buddha in his past life, when as a prince he offered his body to a tigress whose cubs were starving, so that she couldn't feed her own cubs. She was at risk of eating her own cubs so that she could survive. So out of compassion, then he offers his body to the tigress. So in the way of like thinking about just this life, it would seem like, but you could do so much with that life if you just didn't, offer your body in that way. But if you think on the scale of, there's countless past and future lives, if you do this incredibly selfless thing, that life, okay, that's the end of that life, but next life you carry on, right? Most of us, we can't really think that way, so it's not really realistic to act like that. On the other hand, there's just just use common sense about,
So the question is, we talked about suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So So we are seeing everywhere there is a suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're going on the road, so someone is acting like fighting, something is happening, and if you read the news, some accident, some bad news always we are hearing.
Yeah.
So it is also affecting our, our mind, right?
Yeah.
So we are feeling bad that day, or sad about that news.
Yeah.
And sometimes we feel that angry. Why
Angry, yeah.
it is happening?
Yeah.
We feel no control on that. So actually it is actually spoiling our day, right?
Well, yeah.
So we are thinking about the suffering, but even though we have concern about that, it is affecting our happiness, right?
Yes, but you have to be careful not to blame the newspaper or not to blame the news. It's the way you're reacting to it that's spoiling your day. It's not the news itself. I mean, one is like newspapers and media. It's biased. So, I mean, biased in the sense of horrific things, horrific news makes the news. Like there's a lot of good things that happen everywhere all the time that if they reported in the news, people are not going to buy newspaper because it's not really very interesting, right? Like I'm reading this Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now. It's kind of a popular book right now. Like, I mean, this is a big, I think it's called cognitive bias. It makes the point that newsworthy stuff is mostly bad news because we're kind of just, by evolution, we're wired to be very aware of like dangers, right, and to avoid the dangers. So those things naturally get our attention a lot. Whereas, other things that are a lot of good things happening in the world, they're not reported so much. For example, I think in the last 30 years, the number of people who've come out of dire poverty has been so much that it would be like 137,000 people every day. So you never see that reported. I mean, there's a lot of long-term also trends of very good things happening in the world that you don't see reported, like unless they're not on the newspaper. So that's one thing. Another thing is, it's easy to be, and it's true, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world, so if we just think about that, it can feel totally overwhelming. So one way to deal with that is, well, think about what can I do? If there's a small sort of local situation that I can do something about that, focus on that. Because if I just especially these days when we receive information from every corner of the planet, like all the time, if we just sit back and just are a passive receptor of all that information, then it can feel like we're completely helpless. But if instead, don't pay so much attention to all of that. Try to focus on more local problems in your own family or in your own neighborhood or in your own workplace or whatever, and think about how can you help this one person, that one person, that one person. And that becomes a source of satisfaction. And if you do that one by one, because that's where you can actually make a difference. I mean, it's true, we can't really make a difference on the world stage just like that. But if we can make a difference just with one person, the person who's there, like in our presence, then that's something that, we feel good about. Right? And that helps to deal with that sense of being overwhelmed.
Venerable,
Yes?
I mean, just a little observation. When you care about others, when you think about others, you think less about your own suffering and your own problems. It helps you to step out of that.
Yeah.
Make it more manageable.
Exactly.
And also it is that wisely selfish. You're nice to people and people will reciprocate that niceness.
Also, yeah. That's true. Yeah. I mean, each of these, we've just gone through 7 steps today, but each of the 7 steps, there's so much to think about. So, but the reason for kind of going through all 7 steps in sort of quick succession, and I didn't even get to the last 4, which I'll come to tomorrow, but is to, well, I don't know, if you're new to it, probably they each seem quite isolated from one. Each one seems somewhat isolated from the others. But if you do, again, I mean, you can think about, like the first one we started off with equanimity, thinking about all beings are the same as in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. It's an extremely profound thing to think about. I mean, I don't know, since I learned about that in 2000, so in like 18 years, I mean, it's been 18 years since I sort of learned and seriously took interest in that idea and been thinking about it. And still now, I feel like every time I really think about it, it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's such a profound kind of thing that every sentient being wants happiness and wants to be free from suffering. It can seem very trivial, but it's like you could just spend hours thinking about that, right? So each of the topics, there's so much to think about. So it's good to spend, if you're going to meditate on this seriously, to spend, some days or, weeks meditating on each of those steps. And then in that session, just, spend a few seconds on the rest of the steps. And then go through them one by one and deepen them one by one. And then when you go through all of them, it becomes so much powerful. You just touch on, say, equanimity or touch on the kindness of sentient beings. And because you've spent time thinking about that, repeatedly, then just thinking about it for a moment, it brings a very strong effect on your mind. So then you combine that with all these 7 steps together, then it becomes, the cumulative effect becomes incredibly powerful. But you have to have the experience of both thinking about each of them deeply and then thinking about all of them kind of in short succession, like together. So that's kind of there's this, this meditation is all part of this greater sort of outline of all of the Buddha's teachings called the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, or the Lam Rim, which is an uncommon feature of Tibetan Buddhism. Not that the Tibetans created it, actually it was the first text presenting all of the Buddha's teachings in this way was the Indian Pandit Atisha, Dipankara Sri Jnana from West Bengal, who went to Tibet in the later part of his life and then composed this first Lam Rim, or graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. So the idea is that all of the Buddha's teachings, they lead people of different dispositions, with different ways of thinking about the world and at different stages of spiritual development. They gradually lead all of them towards enlightenment, to enlightenment. So each different facet of the Buddha's teachings is actually part of a path of practice for one person to achieve enlightenment. So how do you, meditate on, each of the different facets of Buddha's teachings, and how do they relate to the others? So this presentation is part of that, but the same reasoning applies to all of the Buddha's teachings. That you can focus very, you can focus exclusively and for a long time on just one facet, and go very deeply into that. And you should, but not at the expense of thinking about the others. Then think about the next, then think about the next thing, then the next thing, next. Like you can think about the suffering. Like the truth of that suffering exists is something, the first of the Four Noble Truths. That suffering exists, something incredibly profound. So you can think about that, for some time. And then think about the second of the Four Noble Truths. What are the causes of suffering? Where does suffering come from? Why is it that suffering exists? Why do we have, sickness and disease rather than everybody just being perfectly healthy? Why is that? Why do we have, loneliness and depression instead of everybody just feeling happy and connected? Like, why is that? What is going on here? What are the causes? And then you can think about the next. Is it possible to eliminate the causes? If you were to do that, how would you do that? Yeah. Anyway, I hope you see something interesting here, and you can, think about more in your own time. That's another nice thing about these kind of meditations is you don't have to be sitting quietly on a meditation cushion at home. You can be driving your car, riding on the bus, having a lunch break by yourself, and then think about all these things we've been meditating on. And even if you feel so inclined, even close your eyes and try to kind of go a little deeper on it. But you can also think about it in quite a gentle, kind of ordinary way. And it brings insight to the mind. You learn by thinking about these questions. So, so thank you all. So at the end of the session, usually we make a short prayer. Think of all that we've been doing something very positive here together for the last 2 hours. So think of all the positive energy we've created, merit, and rejoice. Think how wonderful it is. What a good job we've done. We've done something very good. Rejoice. And then think about all the other good things wholesome things, meritorious or virtuous things, done by other people like ourselves in the world, and then also by other people much more realized than ourselves, highly realized beings, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and rejoice at how wonderful it is. And then we can end with a simple prayer that whatever positive energy we've created in this way, may it all be directed that, such that every sentient being is free from all forms of suffering. And that every sentient being who is like ourselves and wanting happiness has all the causes and conducive conditions to have perfect happiness, up to full enlightenment. And may all of our own actions only contribute towards the welfare of sentient beings. Okay, so thank you again. And yeah, so we have a session tomorrow from 10 to 1. And then